Good afternoon. Welcome to this presentation on COVID-19 vaccines. My name is Ayesha Akhtar, and I am a volunteer with Partners in Health, and I'm really excited to be here today to share some information with you about the COVID-19 vaccine, the boosters, the third dose. So hopefully we'll get everyone on the same page, and we will go through these slides. If there are any questions, just let me know. In my day job, I am the Director of Education with the Epilepsy Foundation of Greater Chicago. So public speaking is my forte. It's what I love doing. So please definitely bring any questions you have, and we'll go from here. All right. So a lot of this is to kind of figure out where we are at. 1 year later, the vaccine came out and everyone was kind of wondering, what's going on? The vaccine came out too soon. Some people say, others could not wait for the vaccine. There's a lot of myths and misconceptions about the vaccine. So we're going to kind of talk about that now that we're in a different phase of the pandemic where people are either seeking their booster or maybe some still aren't even vaccinated. So let's go through everything. So this is an opportunity to see if anyone has any questions. But I know the common question is, what is the difference between the third dose and the booster? So we'll go through that. I'm not going to read all of these key topics, but as you can see here, there's a lot of things that we want to talk about for today. Potential side effects is a big one. That's often a reason to not get the vaccine in the first place. But as we've learned more and more data, we know that the side effects are actually quite mild and that the side effects from COVID itself are actually worse. So hopefully this will give some information on some myths and misconceptions. Great. So as you can see, we have now 3 approved COVID vaccines in the United States. Everyone has taken one of these 3. I myself have taken Pfizer. My entire household took Pfizer. Some people in my family, my extended family, took Moderna, and one person took Johnson & Johnson. Thankfully, all of us are fully vaccinated, so we're really excited to enjoy Thanksgiving this year. But as you can see, the efficacy ranges between 70 and 95%. And so there is a wide variety of efficacy here. 2 of them are messenger RNA vaccines, and the Johnson & Johnson is the viral vector. So we'll go through these. So this is a very common question. What is the difference between a third dose and a booster shot? Is it the same? Is it different? The actual medication is the same, but for some in the immunocompromised population, so 65 and older as well, those with a weakened immune system, maybe a cancer patient, etc., for that population, for that demographic, we are calling it a third dose. Again, it's the same medication, nothing has changed. So that's given 28 days after that second dose. So then they'll have those 3 doses, and then that will be considered fully vaccinated. As opposed to the booster shot. So someone like myself, I would be eligible for what's considered a booster shot. So that would be a longer delay after my second dose. So my second dose was end of February. So 6 months later, I would be eligible for that booster shot for Pfizer. And lots of people are starting to get those boosters now. And now we know that the FDA does approve the mixing of vaccines so that if you had Pfizer before, you're able to take Moderna or even Johnson & Johnson. So that has been demonstrated to be effective as well. Okay, so a lot of people, even my own children, had questions about messenger RNA vaccines. What exactly is that? And I know there was a lot of misconception early on. People confuse that with DNA, and people used to think that I can't take this, my DNA is going to change. Well, if you think back to the biology class that you took way back when, you'll know that the messenger RNA is actually just a part of your biology. And in fact, it's just the set of instructions that your body has all the time. So if anyone has Snapchat, you'll know that there's stories that you can post and they disappear. Or even Instagram and Facebook now have stories. So much like that, the vaccine, the messenger RNA vaccine, is like that, where it you have the messenger RNA instructions in the vaccine, and then your body will interpret those instructions and learn to recognize the actual COVID virus if and when you become infected. And that will instruct your body on what to do if and when you have COVID, so it can create a response right away, creating the antibodies. So, and those instructions disappear right away. So it's just like that Snapchat story. It's injected, disappears, but the instructions remain. And it's actually not new technology at all. If you remember the Ebola outbreak many, many years ago, we used similar technology. And so as soon as talks were happening on how to get the vaccine out there, the people behind the technology of mRNA got to work right away and tried to figure out how to build a vaccine for COVID. So it's not new technology. It's actually quite old technology, at least 20 years old. But of course, they had to wait for the data to come out from coronavirus itself. So there's nothing that happened that would skip a step. The COVID-19 vaccine went through every single phase of the FDA approval process. The one thing that I think a lot of people got anxious about was the fact that it was an emergency use authorization, which absolutely is valid and can happen. And that's just basically a fast track from the final phase to the market. But otherwise, it's followed every single step. The other kind of vaccine, and maybe some of you are very familiar with this type of vaccine, flu vaccines are very similar, is viral vector. So the viral vector uses a common virus, which is known as an adenovirus, to basically alert your body system. So it's basically like a live, inactive, weak virus that is injected into your body. And so it's got the similar goal, which is to tell your body how to respond if and when it was infected with the COVID-19 virus. And it tells your body on how to create the spike proteins, which again builds the immunity. So there are various different ways to create vaccines. And as you know, vaccines have been on the market for dozens of years, and all of us have been vaccinated against various different diseases, and they have been very effective. And so this is just a reminder that all of the different types of vaccines that we have had from childhood till today are all valid ways of building that immunity. And again, just to point out that this vaccine also went through every single step of the FDA approval process. And I know in the beginning it was a matter of availability. Some people could only get Pfizer, some people could only get Johnson & Johnson. So now we have the ability to sort of mix and pick our booster, which me personally, I think is quite interesting. Since I had an mRNA vaccine, I'm actually curious to get the Johnson & Johnson just to help my body sort of have that cross immunity. All right, so this is a little background. I know there's a lot of words on the screen, but this is a little bit of a background on how vaccines kind of went through these phases. So there's four phases of trials through the FDA. So in step one is the information gathering. So we already knew about the technology, we already knew about the messenger RNA process and what that entailed and what it meant to actually create something that was going to fight the virus. Then it comes the time to do the trials, and maybe you or someone you know was even a part of those trials. I actually have a friend who was a part of the Moderna trial, and so that was really exciting to watch her go through that process. You know, definitely a lot of high fives and crossed fingers, and you know, here we are, and everything looks great. But of course, the hard part there is to get a demographically wide variety of people to be a part of those trials. And that's just like a completely separate conversation, but that is something that needs to be considered when we are talking about the FDA phases of trials. So then in that third box, after we have the evidence, for at least 6 months of time, and we've gone through side effects, adverse events, and we've monitored everything, then we can actually push through for the EUA. And that's where we landed. And then we have the continued monitoring and collection of trial data, which is where we are today, which is what enabled us to get to the point of knowing, all right, it's time for a booster or it's time for a third dose. So that is where we are today. This is a question that comes up often. And in my family, we had 2 family members who got pregnant during COVID and actually got their vaccines during COVID. So that was really great. And I was very pleased to see that they did get the vaccine. It is extremely safe for pregnant and nursing women. As you can see, ACOG and the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, also those 2 organizations encouraged and recommended vaccines for both pregnant and nursing women, because studies have shown that the antibodies can be transmitted via breast milk. So that's great news, and also great news that the COVID vaccines have no impact on fertility. And I saw it firsthand, again, with my family members, 2 family members, 2 women who got pregnant and delivered very healthy babies. So that was really great to see. And again, we can all convene this Thanksgiving all vaccinated. All right, so maybe some of you on this call had some side effects, and feel free to chime in on the chat and share what your side effects were. Again, as I mentioned in the very beginning, I had Pfizer, pretty mild. I think maybe my arm was sore. So I just made sure I kept moving my arm throughout the day. The second dose hit me a little bit harder, where I kind of just was tired, sat in bed, completely binge watched Bridgerton. So that was fine. But really no major side effects. Any sort of vaccine or several types of medication will cause minor side effects. And, even taking Aleve sometimes as a pain medication has caused side effects. So I say this so that everyone kind of remembers that any medication, any vaccine, there will be some minor side effects. And all of this is good. These are your body's way of telling you that, yes, I received the medication, it's working, and we are processing it. So that is good. And those are usually very, very short-lived. The reason why you are asked to wait for 15 minutes post-vaccination is just to make sure and rule out that there are no severe acute reactions right at the site of the vaccine, the site on your body, just to make sure there's no swelling, etc. But in the event that there are some sort of severe side effects, then obviously you should seek medical care right away. But those really haven't been reported. But again, you can't say all or never in the field of medicine. So it is possible, but it's not very likely. All right, this was another question that came up quite a bit. So we started getting excited about the vaccines. It felt like gaming, trying to get online, trying to get the vaccines, going on websites every day, stalking them. And then all of a sudden, all this news came out about the variants. And then we all kind of took a pause and thought, oh no, will the vaccine still work against variants? Well, the great news is that yes. Again, not every vaccine is going to be 100% effective against anything. But to the most part, again, the efficacy was anywhere between 60 and 97%. And we are still closely monitoring people who have had COVID after getting the vaccine. Those are the breakthrough cases. But we are seeing that the immunity from the vaccination is a lot stronger once a person has been vaccinated. And of course, masking is probably the best solution. So even if you do have the vaccine, if you find yourself in a crowded area, it's always important to just go ahead and wear a mask and keep distant, just because the virus is still kind of lingering in the community. It is a communicable disease. So as long as it's in the community, you need to make sure that it has the opportunity to die. And so social distancing, wearing a mask prevents the communicating part of the vaccine. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about who can actually get the vaccines. So good news this week is that now the horizon looks good for the 5 to 11-year-olds, and some of them are going to start getting vaccinated very soon. So that's really exciting. And otherwise, every person over the age of 12 should be able to get a vaccine, whether it's Pfizer or Moderna. As you can see on the screen, it's a little bit different, but all of these are available to anyone. And one thing I definitely want to stress is that the vaccines are free. And so if anyone tries to charge you, you should alert a higher power, because no one should be charging you for the vaccine. It is paid for by the US government, including people who are undocumented, who have no insurance, etc. So if you have any questions about any of that, you can feel free to reach out to us, Partners in Health, and we can help find a place that you might feel more comfortable in going to get the vaccine, whether it's the booster or the third dose. But as far as the booster, from what I've heard thus far from coworkers who have started to get the booster, it's literally as simple as walking into Walgreens, asking for the booster, getting it, even also with the flu shot. Very, very simple. So that is great news. So I wanted to talk, I know I mentioned a couple slides ago about the trials. So what's so important in the field of medicine and research and public health is to really have an equitable understanding of any sort of burden of disease across various demographics. So as you can see here, it's not exactly even. So this is, like I was saying, a separate problem, but this is to be transparent and to show the majority of people who did participate in the trials were definitely white, and then you see like a much smaller representation in the Black, Asian, and Native American communities and Hispanic communities. So I think this is something that we have to think about as something that's definitely has emerged during the pandemic, how there is such an issue of inequity within the field of public health, within medicine, and we are trying to sort of break the veil and make healthcare a lot more equitable. So this is a great place to start, is to build trust in the community so that we can, for example, these vaccines that are available today are based on people who have stepped out and said, yeah, I will be a part of this trial and I will help make this come to market. So this is a great way to pay it forward. So if you ever get invited to join a trial, if you're ever curious about joining a trial, your results, your participation can really help a future medication. So that's just something to consider. It's really, really important to be diverse within clinical trials. And here's a little bit more information about the different types of high-risk condition people who did participate in the trials. So 2/3 of Americans definitely have some sort of comorbidity or even are immunocompromised. As you can see here, there is a significant list, but the majority really didn't have any high-risk conditions for the Pfizer and for Moderna and for Johnson & Johnson. So that's great. So this is just like the majority of Americans who participated in this trial really had nothing else going on. And so when we hear about the adverse events and the adverse side effects, it's really those people who had really severe additional comorbidities that cause them to have that increased risk for COVID-19 complications. So as you can see here, cardiovascular disease, hypertension is definitely on the top of that list. So I've been talking quite a bit, and so this is a good opportunity for me to check in and see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat maybe anything I've said or any experience you've had with the vaccine. Would love to hear it.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. A question around our office was surrounding boosters about all adults or even, anyone 16 and up or 12 and up. Have you heard anything about people who aren't necessarily eligible right now based on health guidances for like pre-existing conditions, or when might the general population be eligible for a booster dose?
That's a great question. And that's something that we've talked about in my office. So I work in a social service agency. We work with people with epilepsy. So in our office, the majority of our staff is fairly healthy and is not immunocompromised. But because we are in a situation where we work with an immunocompromised population, it would be recommended for us to be a part of the current wave of people getting the boosters, and the current wave being the immunocompromised, 65 and older. But if someone had no other health symptoms, otherwise very healthy, was working from home, they could just follow the guideline of 6 months after their last dose.
Great, thank you.
Great. Well, there are lots of words on the screen here, but as you can see, these are really common questions that we've been getting. So hopefully something resonates with you. Lots of questions on the vaccine safety. As you can see here, that came up a lot. The vaccine is not going to change a person's DNA. It contains messenger RNA, which does not alter the genes. Again, that's something that you have to think back to that day in biology class where you learned about DNA and mRNA. And much like the Snapchat and the Facebook story and the Instagram story, that vaccine will deliver the instructions to your body and then disappear. So there's like no lingering sort of COVID virus or anything like that. Those were a lot of the myths that were very prevalent early on. Another thing I just wanted to stress is that, again, this is not new technology. Messenger RNA has been around for at least 20 years. And so because the blueprint was already there, it was that much easier to develop the COVID-19 vaccine. But there were absolutely no shortcuts taken by the FDA. I mean, this is not the time to take shortcuts. So it is an absolutely safe and effective. And it's the most altruistic thing a person could do is to get this vaccine. So, and I just wanted to point out, so in sort of that theme of altruism, it is not mandatory. Of course, it's not mandatory, but it is the best thing that you can do to protect yourself with that invisible shield. And especially because so many people work in either a high-risk group or live or work with someone who is high risk. It is just the best thing that you can do, because the more unvaccinated people we have in our society, the more chances the virus has for a host and then its ability to mutate. And that's what we want to prevent is the further mutation and further transmitting of this virus. So we kind of talked about this a couple slides ago, but I know the variants come up again. We are really excited to share that the current vaccines that we have are going to be very good against the various different types of COVID variants. But again, more people vaccinated is going to be the best solution to all of this. And so whether it's getting your third dose, getting a booster, or you personally convincing someone to even get a first dose, whatever it takes, we need more vaccinated people so we can prevent the sort of surge of variants. But the best solution, again, social distancing, wearing a mask is going to be the best thing because we want to prevent the vaccine from spreading. Oh. Whoops, sorry about that. I am going to turn on my video. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them at this time. I know it's kind of a heavy topic over lunch to talk about vaccines.
Well, if no one else chimes in, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking your time to share your expertise on this topic. And this was very useful, lots of great information.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And as always, please continue to visit Partners in Health for additional information and to stay up to date on all the amazing work that they are doing on the ground.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.